All right, looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give a few seconds for people to join, and then we'll jump right in. This is a live stream. Yeah, I see. Mike has joined as well.
Okay.
That's great. I'll bring him on stage and see if we can get. Okay, as Mike kind of joins us, let's kick things off. Let's get started. I'm Prateek. I'm on the team at Eigen Labs on the marketing side. I'll be moderating today. We've got Radhika Venkatraman. She's the CEO and co-founder at Arbis AI. We've got Sriram, who's the founder of Eigen Cloud, and we've also got Mike Dumas, who's joining us today, who works at Citadel. Today's conversation is about something that's showing up every day, and like right now. And this is essentially about agents exploding, like unstoppable explosion of AI agents. And one thing is very clear, that as AI agents explode, there's always this question about how these agents are going to operate at machine speed inside, let's say, enterprises, and how things are going to like work in terms of like permissions, opaque actions, integrations, audit gaps. So the big question is how the industry wants to standardize this risk so we can safely scale AI. We've got a great panel today to talk about this. We want to define a mental model around what AI GRC looks like, which is governance, risk, compliance, and what that means for the agentic world and what actually works in the enterprise in practice. So without further ado, I'll give it off to Sriram. Maybe you can kick things off.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Really excited to be here. Radhika, pleasure to join you on this stream. And Mike, welcome to the stream. I'm Sriram, founder at Eigen Cloud. And one of the main thrusts that we have taken is figure out how to supply trust for the agentic era. So when you think about agents, right? So agents are just like AI models which have the ability to make tool calls, right? So if you think of an AI model is like a brain, an agent has hands, right? It can go do things. It can take actions. And so once you're endowing an AI model with the ability to take actions, all the Pandora's boxes open. Now the question is, what are the controls? How do you make it secure? How do you ensure it's trustworthy? How do you ensure that you're not propagating excess risks? How do you govern these systems? Like all the questions that we had earlier with human systems, which can take and have significant consequences, show up in the agent era. And so today's chat, I'm excited to have Radhika and Mike join us to talk about how this intersects in a domain that I myself not very deeply familiar with, which is the enterprise domain. So what we have done at Eigen is to think kind of first principles about how trust verifiability might work in this world. And so it's a pleasure and privilege to have Radhika here to talk to about her thesis on this space. So Radhika, if you want to give a quick overview of your background as well as your interest in this space, we can get started.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you on this conversation. Let me try to basically give my perspective more from an enterprise perspective, right? For the last 3 years, of course, we've all seen the dawn of the AI era, if you will, starting from a plain old search like GPT to agents to agentic and so on and so forth. But as we start to see the true explosion, I almost akin it to the world of networks. And I sort of go back to my background. I spent 20 years at Verizon, spent 5 odd years at Credit Suisse, was working at Cerberus for the past 3 years, and also helping a number of startups in AI scale up. And one of the main things I think of from an agentic AI is it's not that different from the way the networks worked. If we ever had humans sit and try to figure out what's going on with the network around the world, we would probably be employing everybody from around the world. And so imagine a future where you have just as many agents that are not just autonomous, but are empowered to behave as an agentic economic fabric, if you will. Then, and if they operate at 1 millionth or a billionth of a second, then how on earth can any human truly monitor them? So the very definition of traditional GRC changes when it comes to agentic AI. And therefore, my perspective on this is that while you do need governance, it starts with first being able to verify who you are as an agent, and then what you did as an agent. And not only that, how effective you were. That's even more important, because why do we need agents that don't really add a lot of value, even if it's in the thousands? And then be able to remove agents that are not effective or not performing, not very dissimilar to how you would manage enterprises. But enterprises today are not at all probabilistic, it's very deterministic. And if you introduce a probabilistic AI with the attributes of the size and scale of networks, then you need a very automated framework that allows you to manage and monitor them. At least that's the overarching thesis, Sriram, and I think you will understand it with your very deep networking background.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the analogy. Right, we have I don't know, billions of network nodes all around the world which connect us, and there's no way to like manage them in a uh, human centric manner. And I think your analogy is speaking to AI agents are going to proliferate similarly or even more extremely. And so we need automated mechanisms to actually govern, monitor, control, analyze, audit these agents. A fun thing from the wild I want to just share is this is, I think, today morning. Is somebody launched a court for AI agents. So this is actually a project built on Eigen, where what they did is they said, "Hey, I'm going to give the ability for a judge built, which itself is an AI agent built on top of Eigen, to monitor, resolve disputes across many agents." So this is a kind of like a fun hack, but this is so some of the signals from the wild are pointing to the kinds of things that we would see in a more enterprise world going forward once these tools are more steady and stable. Is disputes across AI agents resolved more automatically rather than with manual intervention. So these are the kinds of things we're seeing right now, is these sparks, so to say, from the wild. And then like for them to be industry grade, industry standard, enterprise compliant, like there's a whole bunch of work we need to do to get us there. The Radhika, you mentioned a bit on the scale and the need for automation. How do you think about, when people say agents, because it's a buzzword, they like merge all kinds of things into this like amorphous concept. Do you have a framework or a way of thinking about categorizing these, the word agents and what it refers to?
I don't know that I would ever get purist. I never was purist about anything. But, it's more than just a piece of software, right? Whenever you have a software for which you have inputs and you can reasonably test out the outputs and hope that it will behave the same way again and again, that is your traditional software. But the minute you basically say, I'm going to give you inputs, and then I'm going to tell you what I want as an outcome, and every time you see a different data, keep acting differently, then I think you are the beginning of something called as agentic behavior. But at the same time, your agents don't truly understand causality, don't understand exactly how the human brain thinks. And so we're going to unleash, if you will, a whole bunch of behavior out there that is going to try to mimic a portion of the human brain. And that to me is where you start to get into some piece of trouble, right? It's not as if humans are not biased. It's not as if humans do not use profanity, but they do it in spite of knowing whether they can and should do. But it's humans influencing a certain behavior and then agents furthering that behavior that makes them, like in my mind, at least semi-autonomous to autonomous. And so I look at it from three perspectives, Shriram. One is you could have one enterprise in which they have many different providers of agents that can work with each other. Then you have enterprises working with enterprises. And then you get into a third world, which is truly beyond just enterprises. You can have your robots and your physical AI and so on, truly all working together. And so it's a progression. And I know it's not all there today, but even within one enterprise, I can buy agentic AI, if you will, from three companies and build some myself. And even there, if I just had four companies working together, it's a problem. And it's a problem even if I have 25 agents. I'm not talking about 10,000 agents. I'm talking 25 agents, because 25 agents can do the job of like 2,500 people. And so, I think people need to have a mental model where they think of this piece of software as 100xing a human in terms of a potential outcome. And so, if you had 2,500 people, would you not have HR? Would you not have policy? Would you not have some kind of a process? And I'm not suggesting it needs to be militarily organized, but you still will organize them in order to be able to monitor them and measure outcomes.
That's really interesting. Radhika, last year this time we in our company we started a new position, parallel to director of human resources. We started this thing called director of agentic resources.
Oh,
Turns
wow.
out I was a little too early, and so we tried to basically say like we should have agents be like parallel to humans, and so that was too early at that time, but we are revamping some of that effort. So really excited to hear like how these ideas can propagate and influence bigger companies as well. So when you were talking about the kind of like categories, I think that's we use a similar taxonomy, so it's interesting to see that. So we think about single player agents, multiplayer agents, and zero player agents. Okay, so a single player agent is something that's used for a single person. Um, in I think, and I'll use my model and then like we can compare notes. And the multiplayer agents are ones where they are used across multiple people, so they necessarily traverse information control and privacy and risk boundaries, and so they need to be like held to a higher standard of account than you would if they're single player. And then you have zero player agents, and agents that are just on their own doing their own thing and not necessarily like working for anybody else. And usually we think of these, from our point of view on a more like consumer standpoint. And when you think about it from a consumer standpoint, the thing we would normally say is if you had a single player agent, it's like a personal assistant or something. The level of trust and verifiability you want is you want control and ownership. So you just own it, and then it runs on your computer or on your AWS account, and then you're pretty good to go. But once you move into this multiplayer category, you get into this issue of, okay, it's not just so here, like the way we're defining it is not that there are many agents, that there is one agent which is serving multiple parties, right? So that's the interface that we think about. So when an agent is serving multiple parties, you need that agent. Now the question comes, who's running that agent? Who can control the prompts on that agent? Who can govern the agent? Who can upgrade the agent? Like, is the code that you think is running in the agent the same as the code that's actually running? What data resources does it have access to? What of the commons accounts and access controls does this agent have? All these issues show up when we go to multiplayer agents. I think what I'm hearing from you is even if it's a single enterprise, it's still a multiplayer, because essentially there's inside the company there is multiple different vendors. There is potentially inside the company multiple employees accessing these resources. So these like horizons of access control, I think would be much more similar to a multiplayer setting than a single player setting.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm using a B2B and you're using a B2C. It's not all that different, except that an enterprise itself is a collection of many, employees. Otherwise, of course, if you get to a point where zero people run enterprises, maybe I guess that doesn't matter. you know, they
But
can
then
all.
the interface between these enterprises need to have the trust,
Yeah,
governance,
exactly.
compliance.
And then it's a question of who owns them and what's the liability at that level. But even with all kidding aside, like even if you take a single employer performing critical functions, whether it's financial services, telecom, healthcare, it doesn't matter. They all still are in a regulated framework. Uh, Totally unregulated, do whatever the hell you want to do, are very few industries, right? Most have at least consumer protection, or they have serious regulation or whatever. So I think first and foremost, introducing multi-operator agentic framework into a single enterprise still needs some framework to guardrail them. And the word guardrails are used like very, very lightly. Most people think as long as they get somebody to check the box, it's pretty okay. But we do have many frameworks, right? EU has taken a leadership position and said like the EU AI Act needs to be enforced on all of its companies. Otherwise, there is up to a 7% of the revenue liability against, let's call it malicious behavior. Then you have the NIST framework, which has the AI risk management framework. You have a whole bunch of them. MITRE has something, ISO has something, and so on. At this particular time, we don't have one harmonic framework, but by and large, all of them are trying to manage the risks of behavior, if you will. So I would still call that output, right? I mean, you take output and you basically validate against a bunch of frameworks, and that's one aspect. But you have to verify the behavior of the reasoning itself. So that's another aspect of it. And then, of course, you have to measure and monitor continuously, because it's not a point in time, because you measure it now and then you measure it 4 months later. A lot could have happened along the way, if you will. And so I think we're pretty excited about the fact that we can leverage like blockchain and infrastructure that you have built to sort of create that persistent immutable audit of the transactions. But even beyond that, right, the whole sequence from the software that people use all the way to the hardware and the data and the interactions along the way all need to get reimagined. And I think that's kind of where we are. And while there is so much noise about agentic AI, most companies, I don't think, are at a point where they're even deploying 20 agents.
Right.
They're still getting started, and some are at much different place than others, but I think people are just getting started.
Right. Well, one question I had, and this is for my understanding, and this is to the both of you, and taking the network analogy that you mentioned, Radhika. I mean, networks essentially scale because computers monitor each other, and then humans are stepping in as exceptions. Now, if you draw that analogy to, let's say, thousands of agents, or like hundreds of thousands of agents across different like workflows, how do you see uh, the operating model of humans, like humans in that particular loop? And what are the, let's say, specific triggers where humans need to kind of get involved or get escalated into?
I will use the network analogy for those who probably understand that well. I mean, there is a framework, and it's called as the FCAPS framework in the world of networks, right? And I don't want to sort of make it sound like you need exactly the same thing. But one of the most important things in that is the ability to monitor and surveil your network. And there are standards, and so every vendor usually operates and interoperates because of the standard. If there were zero standards, then it would be literally impossible to monitor and maintain that network. And when we expect networks to perform at 5 nines of availability, I always tell people you only have about 18 minutes roughly of downtime. And so you never ever design to go and fix it during the downtime. You are building resiliency into it. And therefore, you have to build for an always on network. And so, if you sort of just transport that basic analogy to agents, you have to be at any point in time always have the whatever your intended outcome is, it needs to sort of always be performing at an optimal level, always, not like sometimes, not like 2 hours a day, it's not performing optimally. You have to design for it to perform optimally all the time. When it is not performing optimally, you have to be able to quarantine it. And if something is an issue, you have to be able to fix it before it becomes a gigantic issue. You have to have resilience built in. You have to have fault tolerance built in. And so you never sort of build networks with the ability to go fix it. You always build it for always on. And similarly, I think if we take that approach to the agentic economy, we will see the agentic economy thrive. Otherwise, I'd have a very hard time imagining we will have like a half a trillion or $1 trillion agentic economy without all of these same kinds of principles put in place.
Right.
Yeah.
Shyam would love to hear your thoughts as well, like specifically on coordination and networks.
Yeah, no, I very much agree with what Radhika just said. The here, I think the model of like you need resilience and like adaptivity built inside, and so when you want to aspire to that level of resilience, you have to have them mostly be automated. It cannot be like the manual is the exception. And people are setting the policies, controls, pre-planning, designing these systems correctly, but ensuring that you don't have significant downtime and so on means most of these things have been automated and remain at high availability. The the maybe getting into the concept here a little bit on where trust, verifiability, auditability show up. So one way I like to think about trust and verifiability, specifically the word verifiability, is there are two grades of what you might want to call verifiability. Verifiability on um, the nuts and bolts of okay, this is the code that ran, this is the data that it consumed, this is the output that it produced, ensuring that only that code ran on those data inputs and those action spaces and then actually went and did it. So this I think of as verifiable runtime, verifiable execution. Like that's one category of verifiability. Another category of verifiability is more on the semantic intelligence layer, which is, did this system produce the outcomes that they were intended to produce? I think Radhika defined agent as a system that can take intents and then translate them into like outcomes. And that translation, you may run this same piece of code and it does translate it correctly sometimes and doesn't translate it correctly other times. So there's another layer which is about verifying. So there's a layer which is about verifying that the code ran as intended, ran on the data, produced this output, and so on. There's another layer which needs to verify that the outcomes match the intent. And so at least that's two layers we think about. And our tools and techniques give a lot of power to the first problem, which is runtime verification. So that this code's running. For example, in the AI court, fun agent court example I was showing, the thing that agents may want to know when they're negotiating or debating with each other is that, oh, this AI agent with this code base is going to run and settle my debates. Then it's not corruptible. It's not like Sriram's introducing prompts in the middle or changing the code or changing the model to be like non-neutral or whatever. Whereas, so that's just the first axis. But did this AI judge or whatever system work correctly? Did it resolve cases according to the principles of fairness and justice that we've laid down? So that's like an out of scope for what we do at Eigen. So would love to hear from you, Radhika, on the enterprise side, how you think about these two things. Do you have a different framework for organizing the
So the
level of
first, yeah, first off, I think that's a great way to put it. The first layer that you talked about, I think needs to become table stakes. I don't know that it has become table stakes, but it needs to become table stakes, right? So that's my perspective on it. The second one is actually, I don't want to make it sound like it's optional. The second one is equally important as the first, but there is some level of latitude because what are you judging? Are you judging like a process? Are you judging a workflow? Are you judging a unit? And how big is that unit? Does the unit consist of like 3 processes? I mean, I think most enterprises should have some latitude in terms of defining at what level they want to judge the semantic behavior that sits on top of the layer one that you talked about. I believe even there is a lot of difficulty in terms of defining it, right? And so I think most people are struggling with the fundamental notion that the more AI you introduce, the more opacity you're actually introducing. And the more opacity that you introduce, the more you have already taken humans out of the loop. How are humans going to be in the best position to validate the opaque process if you introduce AI? And therefore, I think we've got to start thinking of a number of things. One is, do all those old processes hold good, or do we need to think of new sets of processes? Because whoever said every process must be deterministic, maybe it can be probabilistic. And so, I think there is some level of reimagining of the processes that have to happen. You don't have to reimagine the company, but you can start reimagining one piece of work process at a time. The second is, if you now say to somebody like, let's say me, if I did something every day and I'm supervising that thing, that's great. But if I did it 4 years ago, then my supervision is questionable at the end of 4 years in terms of the quality supervision I can do on something that I was hands on 4 years ago. And so I think and therefore, if you just keep, sort of abstracting it away, you will start to realize that humans can only monitor, they cannot verify. You must have systems and agents or software that actually verify. And then you have to be able to have controls and instrumentation in place such that when humans are monitoring, they are able to still pinpoint and troubleshoot and either introduce or eliminate what is not behaving.
right? So in some sense, it seems like an agent is a hybrid of a more deterministic code and a non-deterministic human. And so you have, humans have always been non-deterministic. So I think the real innovations here will bring like the best of the processes from the two things together and
Yeah.
find what is tailored and correct
Right.
for
Right.
these applications.
Right. 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 I think the real question for us is to figure out, nobody's asking AI to be, more deterministic than a human, but how do you give humans the comfort that the AI they are introducing is no more non-deterministic than themselves?
Right, right.
I think
Perfect.
that's going to be the challenge that we all have to continue to work on and
Yeah.
innovate on.
So one of the tools we built at Eigen is, part of what we found is in AI inference, you have this non-determinism, which is coming not only because it's intentionally non-deterministic. There's a portion of AI which is intentionally non-deterministic, where you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to choose a random seed, and I know I don't want every time I give a response, I want to behave differently, just because that's a marker of intelligence." And so I'm going to have a random seed that goes with it, and every time I choose a different random seed, and therefore I get a different answer. Part of what, but it turns out that these AI models, because of the way they've been designed and optimized, even for a fixed seed, they don't actually give you the same answer every time.
Mhm.
And this was a huge issue for us as we were thinking about problems where you want AI to make more and more high stakes decisions, and other people want to verify that the decision was done correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we created this framework called, we call Eigen AI, which is basically a mechanism for executing open source AI models in a deterministic backend. We could only do it on open source because that's what we have access to. Like, we don't have access to the closed source ones. We could take, for example, the GPT OSS model, the open source model, and run it in this framework. So here, this is again, like, there is the two layers of determinism that, just like there was the two layers of verifiability, there's the two layers of determinism. This one will guarantee that every time you run it, you'll get the same answer. But that same answer may not be to your liking. And so that is, the thing I realized is there are categories of problems where verifying that, you run this and you get this answer is still like already, like, removes things like it was not corrupted, it is not partial, it is not manipulated. Like, you're removing a bunch of vectors out of the equation. But you still don't get to the thing that you really, really want, which is, okay, actually it does what I think it should do. And I think closing the semantic translation gap, I think Radhika put it beautifully, that each enterprise, each application has a way of judging these outcomes, whether they're compliant with the intent and the outcomes match. And they may be done at very different resolutions. Is it done for every action? Is it done as a kind of like a unit? Is it done, what's the resolution of this semantic judgment? I think needs to be more open. And I also know, Radhika, you're building some technologies for that. Maybe if you want to speak to that here.
Yeah, so basically, ours is a three-part process. First is to verify the semantics, as you call it, at the level at which we are allowed to verify, because you can get the reasoning traces at a unit level, or even you can get it at an agentic level, if you will, if that agent encompasses multiple decisions. And that's one piece, which is verification. The second piece is really governing, because even if it actually managed to do everything correctly, as you said, the question then is, does it basically adhere to all the basics, right? Is it safe? Is it toxic? Is it, even if it's not hallucinating, is it emitting profanity? Is there risk associated with it? And there are a number of well-established frameworks, so we don't need to reinvent it. It's a matter of the things that an enterprise has to be compliant with. If the enterprise has to be compliant with EU AI Act, fine, you can validate against it. If they have to be compliant against that plus NIST plus something else, then it's a half a dozen things, right? It's not like 20 things. So your output then needs to get governed against a framework. And the third is, I think you have to measure the efficacy of the performance. And you don't know that by just looking at the output. You only know that by looking at the next action after the output. And so to the extent that an enterprise is comfortable providing what the next action was, you can basically verify, govern, and monitor continuously. And the output of verification, governing, and monitoring can be audited at some periodicity too. And so then both the enterprise and anybody else that needs to know what happened can see all three outcomes.
How far are we in enterprise use cases for these agents to be actually, useful? If you keep the trust part aside, right, just on a utilitarian basis. So where are you sensing that, Radhika? Like, how far are we?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, it's not uncommon to see, everybody trying vibe coding. And I think we can all probably agree that it's making developers far more productive. Is it making them effective or not? I don't want to comment on it. I think if you're very good, it makes you excellent. And if you're not good, then I don't know what it does to you. But I think let's say that it at least gets you to the happy middle of a bell curve. So I think coding, everybody is out there doing it. I think marketing has been really pressing the boundaries of AI quite a bit, because AI does do a very good job at summarization and repurposing content and so on and so forth. So I think They are there. HR teams are there, definitely, particularly when it comes to communications, when it comes to talent and resume and so on. We can question whether there is bias and all of that, but there's filters to manage and monitor it. So I would say capital markets, every time there is research content. So wherever you have unstructured data, which I think almost every enterprise has plenty of, uh, people are at varying levels of adoption of it. What I think is not there extensively is like people reimagining their work processes. So they're deploying something here and something here and something here and something here versus saying, can I connect these 8 things with AI? I think very few are doing that. And that is also, I think, a huge challenge for enterprises because there's a big chasm between those who understand then what to do when you start to, introduce so much opacity in the processes, right?
Right. Do you sense the kind of like the market structure here is going to be primarily led by, so the agentification of the enterprise is going to be led by some existing big SaaS or other companies, or like is it going to be led from inside the IT teams of these companies? Do you have a thesis on like how the adoption curve here looks like?
I wish I had a thesis. I don't have a thesis because my my experience suggests that internally they should have been pressing very hard at it, because now you gave them a new tool and they're very familiar with the current processes, and therefore they will push the boundaries of what the new tool can do for them. But my observation suggests that they're not able to do it. And therefore, I am really at a point where I don't know what my hypothesis should be, because I am beginning to sense that the art of changing a process is actually not that straightforward. Because if you tell people, I mean, in the last 30, 40, 50 years, you gave more tools in the hands of developers that actually didn't change the process fundamentally. They just took whatever existing process and sped it up, sped it up, sped it up. Sometimes they eliminated it and said, okay, I step into the next. I think now we're like almost like, I don't want to make it sound like it's Newtonian physics versus quantum mechanics, but in most people's minds, changing the business process feels akin to that to them, because there's also a lot of risk involved, because you don't know when you change that process whether the new process is going to materially impact your P&L, and and who is underwriting that risk. And so I think either you have to take on a bigger risk at a senior level, or you have to give more tools in the hands of people that know the current very well in terms of how they should be imagining the new in the context of this very non-deterministic, very powerful AI that is now in their hands, right? So I think it's becoming easier for those who understand AI to go and draw a new process than it is for people who understand current process to go learn AI and learn to change the process.
Right. Do you have a on the industry types? Do you have a thesis where this goes and takes off first, relative to others? Are software tech companies early adopters, and then it spreads out from there, or you see like asymmetric advantages in finance or other places, and then it spreads out from there?
I think there is asymmetric advantage in finance. And the reason is they have always been very bold about embracing a new technology because they're constantly in the quest for alpha. And so, to the extent that there is like a little bit of alpha to squeeze out of a new technology, they're willing to try it. Now, of course, they're also very highly regulated, so they have to be careful about everything they try. But there is still, like, I mean, tremendous willingness to go try it because they know in the end it is going to help them. Other industries, like, I mean, e-commerce has always been, on the forefront of trying new things. They were always evangelists and like turning out the old, bricks and mortar model. And now they know with AI, they can do more personalization and things like that. So I can easily see these two industries that didn't start with software still being one of the early adopters uh, of software, usually consumer goods. They like to participate as much as, uh, people don't usually talk about brands, but any brands that are out there looking to do any personalization, they're usually in the forefront of embracing technology. People who have field forces are also in the forefront of using technology, because you can now, imagine if you have a field force like 40,000, 50,000 people doing construction jobs or other jobs. You can actually give them gadgets, and you can now give them voice agents. And, it's okay if it is even non-deterministic, because it's actually an assistant to the human workforce. And you're multiplying the efficacy of that human field force, who actually is very good at embracing technology. As much as you would think they're not, they're actually one of the first to embrace any technology, as long as it's convenient and helps them get their job done.
That's super interesting. The tracking industry, like, and the networking story reminds me of early days of Qualcomm. Qualcomm got a breakthrough with the trucking industries wanting to use, like, wireless. And one of the people from Qualcomm started a thing called Natrodyne, which was a AI computer vision for cars and trucks and so on. Again, their first market to break in was also in the trucking industry. It's a very unusual model, but I think your intuition is really good there.
Yeah, I mean, tech industry, I don't know, because to me, I think for a tech industry that is more software based, it's hard to tell what adoption means. Does it mean all the code is generated by AI? Then what does that truly mean? And if you're hardware based, the cycles are very different. And then it is no more than a productivity enabler. And so I think wherever people see a huge revenue opportunity, I think they're going to jump there. Cost opportunity, I think everybody will want to eventually embrace, but to the extent that it is alpha creation, as a financial service person would say, they will jump in.
Right. Super
All right,
interesting.
we're coming up on time, but I wanted to ask a quick question. I mean, if adoption curve is slower, even if it's like software, what does a V1 of AI governance look like, Radhika? Like a MVP V1 that we can just like go and like pitch and like, yeah, okay, this is they're happy, excited, and like want to move ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to me, a V1, even if you have only like 4 agents in your company, should be the fact that you can watch what that agent is doing all the time. Hopefully, you can verify its actions. Hopefully, it's fairly straightforward to make sure it's compliant with your 3 or 4 frameworks that you have to be compliant with. And you can also easily validate whether you saw value, because your CFO and CEO want to see ROI of those agents. What's the point in like giving you a tool which just spit out a whole bunch of things to you, and you don't know whether that was useful stuff or not, right? That to me, is a V1. V1 means you can like simply just monitor what's going on and have a dashboard without like too much fanfare, because like 4 things I can count, right, literally. And even if it's 4 by 4, I mean 4 frameworks, 4 agents, I can still manage that. I don't need too much jazz, but I still need something
Yeah,
in order to be able to see it continuously.
absolutely.
One thing I remember from our first conversation, Radhika, is how insistent you were that it should be like a single line drop in to like get all these features. Can you speak to that a bit? I think it's coming from some deep experience, so I want to make sure
Well, I
our
mean,
audience
one
knows.
of the things I've always said is like when you go into an enterprise, you get bombarded with infinitely many solutions, more solutions than you care, and more solutions than you can handle. And so it's always about that simplicity. And so even if an enterprise X has 4 agents, somebody needs to come in and basically say, I can attach myself to those 4 agents, collect what I need to collect, verify and validate what I need to, and spit out a simple report for you. And I always talk about one line in the sense that it should be as simple as one line of code that an enterprise can call to attach and make that outcome happen. I'm not saying it's one line to create a dashboard, but if it is not as simple as that, and you make it extremely hard, and you say to the enterprise, now you take 2 months to write interfaces to me, and then another month to write interfaces to 5 other things, is generally game over. Whoever figures out how to go into an enterprise, make it super easy for them to consume your tool, I think will be able to make a lot more progress versus those that have it as a high friction activity.
Amazing.
Awesome. No, that's a great point. I want to close out with one quick round of each one of you, like a single takeaway for the audience, and then what they need to look forward to. Radhika, maybe you can go first. Yeah.
Look, I think the AI is real. The value creation you can get even with this version of AI is tremendous. And I am a strong believer that agentic economy is going to be real regardless of the pace of adoption. And therefore, you cannot have humans in the loop. You can only have humans on the loop. And we have to reimagine how we govern, measure, monitor, and verify all the activities. And that's the way I think will be in the future. You need good software that manages and monitors the agentic economy, that then allows humans to feel at least as comfortable as themselves in the non-determinism of the behavior.
Great. Shriram, what is your takeaway?
Making agents, I think when you think about agents, they have already started demonstrating immense capabilities. And we're seeing this in the wild. I think if we solve trust, verifiability, governance around these agents, they go from low stakes environments to high stakes environments. And that's when we see a $1 trillion economy emerging. So it's a privilege to have people like Radhika who understand the context deeply, come in and actually bring these tools to the enterprise world. And it's a pleasure to partner with you, Radhika.
Absolutely.
Same here, Shriram. Thank you so much, Prateek, for doing this.
Thank you, Radhika. Radhika, for people who want to follow your work or reach out to you after this, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Twitter, but I think even more on LinkedIn than Twitter. Maybe I should change that posture a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, I'll drop in the links to your handles. Thanks, everyone. I think this was great. If you're building or deploying agentic systems inside enterprises, I think this conversation today is basically your roadmap. Identity, monitoring, policy enforcement, with humans on the loop. I mean, humans are not going anywhere. So thanks a lot, Radhika. Thanks, Shriram. This is a great conversation.
Thank you.